All right, man. 3, 2, 1. Let's go! I'm the host of the PBE podcast, Troy to the Wire, joined with Nathan Zenero. And we will get to Nathan. He'll do his elevator pitch here in a minute. But first, of course, Nathan, the legendary horizontal well drilling socks by Trunkline. Trunkline is proudly supporting American energy independence with these socks, and they also have a platform that's really cool. It all starts with the idea that he got a scholarship, and the scholarship had a bunch of competition to it, right? He was going to try to get his undergrad degree, blah, blah, blah. He shows up. He prints out his woodworking. You'd appreciate this because you're a carpenter. He built like all these bookcases and desks, and that's what he did for high school, right? And he printed out on 11 by 17 the woodworking work that he did at his job. So when he sat down for the interview, tell him about yourself, why you should qualify for the scholarship, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until he showed him that here's my work. Here's what I do. And then that was the inspiration to Trunkline. Trunkline's a digital portfolio on the website where you put up what you do, put up the before and afters, put up what you do, and allow people to just see it. If it's what they want, they'll call you.
I love it. I'm going to have to check it out.
Yes, trunkline.com, man. It's cool. And the other company that sponsors the PBE podcast is Impact Exploration Services. Impact Exploration Services. And they do mud logging, geosteering, and they have a laboratory where they can do rock eval paralysis, XRF, XRD, fluid analyses on the rocks and cuttings and fluids that are coming out of these wells while we drill them.
Where are they based?
Houston.
Nice.
Yes, Impact is out of Houston. They have a lab there. They got experts there, and you're familiar with that stuff, right? You need mud log information coming in with all your drill bit information as all that relates, right? Is it a sandstone? Is it a shale? Is it a carbonate? So they keep track of that. I bet Impact would be able to hook right up into WellDrive. You might even have Impact already on WellDrive.
I could go check it out.
Nice. I'll ask them too. But I appreciate the sponsorship. Thank you. PBE Podcast always appreciates that. We have some live events coming up. April 14th, we'll be in Houston for a crawfish boil with Stratigraph. We'll be at the Geolog golf tournament in Houston. You're in Houston, right?
Yes, sir.
You got to come to these events.
I'll be there.
Nice. Perfect. We'll be up at the Wichita Falls Southwest Section AAPG event. That'll be cool. North Texas Geological Society is celebrating 100 years.
Wow.
100-year society of geologists just getting together, drinking whiskey, fighting about the rocks.
That's awesome. As they should. Every good geologist needs a fist fight and some about rocks every once in a while, right?
Yes, I totally agree with that. Let me pull up your LinkedIn as we prepare for tonight's happy hour that you are sponsoring, WellDrive. Thank you so much for sponsoring.
Absolutely.
The South Texas Geological Society is also one that's very long. I think it's 1926.
They're getting close to their
29?
Century mark then too.
It's sometime in the next 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yes. So thank you for sponsoring tonight and making that possible. Tell me a quick elevator pitch while I pull up your LinkedIn. Who is Nathan Zenero? What do you do? What do you tell someone when you're in an elevator for 20 seconds? What do you say?
What I do is I help people make things better. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Sometimes it's process, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's tools, sometimes it's technology. We put them all together and we make things better.
Nice to meet you. This is my floor. I'm kidding. All right, Nathan Zenero. Am I saying that right?
Yes, sir. That's it.
Zenero. LinkedIn says this: improving safety, productivity, and quality of life wherever work is done.
That's it.
That's what you want everyone to see. Because when you're commenting or you say something on LinkedIn, all you see is usually the name and then that thing that's under your name in your profile. So that's what you want people to see when you...
That's it. There's... And I really want to put that focus on where the work is done, right? There's awesome men and women who right now are swinging 12-pound sledgehammers, putting connections together on a frac job, and they're racking back pipe, and they're in the hot and they're in the cold, and everything we do needs to make a change there, right? That's all that matters.
Wow, nice, man. Let me jump to your about, which is officially the shortest about section I have ever read live on a PBE podcast. About: recognized industry leader, pioneering, creative problem solver, process optimization specialist, quality control champion.
That's it.
Right on, man. And currently vice president of engineering at WellDrive.
That's it. Yes, sir.
And WellDrive's right here in Houston.
WellDrive's in Houston.
Right on.
Right on the 610 loop. Easy to get in and out.
610 loop.
North side at TC Jester.
Huh. No, I'm not familiar with that. I'm going to be at the Black Horse. I know that's kind of north, up just east.
Is that in the Heights?
It's just west of the airport in the north.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's 20 minutes from us.
Is that right?
Yeah, not too far.
Right on. Right on. Okay, let's do this. Let's jump from that to the quotes and quips with Nathan Zenero. And guess what, man? I'm calling you out. You opened up the book.
Let's do it.
And you found page 55.
You stepped away, and I was like, couldn't help myself.
You saw the Stay Positive book, encouraging quotes and messages to fuel your life with positive energy.
There you go.
Yeah, man. It's a big thing. Energy is a really, really important thing to better understand. And a positive one is better than a negative one. So here we go. Page 55. This one really spoke to you. One person in pursuit of excellence raises the standards of everyone around them. And as they strive for greatness, they bring out the greatness in others. Be that one person today. Talk to me about it, man. What?
Yeah, I've always told everybody I'd rather be John Stockton than Karl Malone. I think there are always on a team someone who has the capacity to lift others, to raise others. And, John Stockton didn't have to score 30 points a game to change everyone he ever played in. And I think leaders and people who want to be leaders need to recognize that the work that they do doesn't have to be what shines all the time. It can be letting others shine. It can be setting people up for success. It can be being that in the background. And that positive spirit and positive attitude is as infectious as a negative one.
Yeah.
Right? And so we need to be mindful of it.
Arguably, the negative ones are even like more.
They can be, for
right?
sure. Yeah.
My experience is, I feel like they are. That negative energy is like it's a youth.
See, I'm a positive person, so I have to believe
that positive energy
positive
is better.
Or at least is equal, right?
At least is equal. Yeah, at least is equal. All right, I'll give you that. All right, I'm going to rock it back to page 1 on this thing. It says 5 ways to be more positive. Count your blessings. You can't be stressed and thankful at the same time. 2, see your challenges as opportunities for growth. 3, don't listen to your negative thoughts. 4, feed yourself with positive encouragement. And 5, choose faith instead of fear. It's interesting. Don't listen to your negative thoughts.
I want to be careful about that one. Sometimes your intuition is sometimes safety. It's telling you should. But your negative thoughts that are intrusive, your negative thoughts that distract you from your mission, just set those aside.
Right. Yeah, there's some things that are clearly negative.
Yeah, and there's some I don't feel safe walking to this dark alley. Might be a negative thought. Maybe you shouldn't walk into that dark alley. But, maybe tomorrow you install a light in that alley so you can walk it down it next time.
I like it. All right, last one, man. Then we'll get to the show. 3 things you control every day are your attitude, your effort, and your actions.
100%.
Okay.
I would say your accountability. Add one more to that.
Add an accountability. Right on. It doesn't matter what others are doing or who you think is being unfair. Every day you can focus on being positive, working hard, and making others around you better.
That's it.
Right on.
If I could do one thing in my career, it's the last statement there. I can only live for so long, but if I can make others better, then I've lasted longer than my lifespan.
Man,
yeah,
that goes back to Angelo, your grandpa.
Yeah,
Grandpa Angelo.
Yep, that's what a way to wrap it all together.
Did that just sum up the whole show? Do we even need to talk about the show? No, listen, man, I truly enjoyed getting to know you, listening to you speak and understanding your passions, understanding really your understanding of the data and understanding of WellDrive and understand, your position at WellDrive, your experience that was super unique. was really close to not being possible at all unless you had that determination and that drive that you did to get yourself out of a hole in a small town and go to the University of Michigan, transfer to the Texas A&M, become an Aggie, and get into oil and gas. And man, I mean, it must be amazing one day to sit down and listen to your wife talk about this story, her perspective of what you did and where you come from. Does she come from the same small town?
Same small town.
No
she lived
way.
up 2 blocks away.
No way.
We started dating when she was 15, and that was 25 years ago. I just told you how old she is, but yeah, it's been a minute.
Dude, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It's amazing, man.
Yeah. It's amazing what 2 people pointing in the same direction can get done when they just keep going.
Right.
And I couldn't have done it without her.
Right.
Not even for a second.
Wow, man, right on. Yeah, I enjoyed a lot of things. I really am interested about WellDrive. I'm interested in learning more about, for me specifically, maybe a little bit more about how the workovers as they get done, how I can better organize that as a company to help me sell assets that I'm putting together and fixing and optimizing. And you're right, I don't plan to operate wells for the rest of my life. I don't know if my kids want to do that. I'm not going to put that pressure on them. I'll do it. I don't mind oil farming. That's what I call it.
There you go.
I'm just an oil farmer, man.
That's it. That's a great way to say it. I love it.
I enjoy it, and they enjoy getting out there and seeing the cows. And my daughter goes, "Are you making oil today?" Like she's pumped. Like,
heck yeah.
So it's cool, but I'm not going to put it on them. I'm not going to assume that they're just going to take over this thing. I want to know that I have a database and I have my ducks in a row as a company that I can say, you know what, maybe it's time to sell. And I don't need to take months or weeks or whatever it is to organize all that and get it. WellDrive already has all that in.
Yeah. Yep. And going back to that used car scenario, you get that one used car, it's got the owner's manual and 15 years of maintenance records and the discount tire rotation schedule. You look at that as a very different opportunity than the one that doesn't, right? And all things being equal, I think most people would choose the one that's got its ducks in a row.
1,000%, man. Yeah. 1,000%. This industry is not just get in, get a bunch of money, get out. No. Industry is about longevity. This industry is about optimization and records. And it's been around for 100 years and it ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
So if you're not doing that kind of thing, or you have that PE model that you thought was going to just come in and drill a bunch of horizontal wells and bounce, you better have your data organized and ready to easily be accessible and explain what you have.
And then for some reason, if you don't bounce and you're stuck with the mess you made, that's the worst one, where you thought you were just going to dump that problem on somebody else and now it's yours and you're kicking yourself. Don't get caught in that.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah, don't be that
guy. He's a natural. Welcome to the PBE podcast, man. The conception segment of the PBE podcast, where we get to sit back and listen to Nathan's story. Introduce yourself real quick, and then just tell us how it all goes, man. How do you end up as, kind of this business development and growth manager of a company like WellDrive?
Yeah. So, that's my role there is actually vice president of engineering.
Okay.
But I think anybody that's in a role like that is also business development. If you work for a company that does sales, everyone sells. That's rule number one.
Yep.
And really, business development can mean a lot of things. It can mean new product development. It could mean new customer development. It could mean just being a thought leader for the company or for an industry or a segment. And so I do all those things, right? Because it's what the job requires.
Yeah. Well, so start us back, rock it back, man. Where are you from? Where were you born? How does this go?
I was born in a town of 1,000 people.
No kidding.
Like a lot of people in the patch, my beginnings were in farm country.
Okay.
Right. I think most everybody that's on a drilling rig today probably came from a farm at some point or, lived near one. But my farm wasn't in Mississippi or in Texas. It was in Southeast Michigan. Right?
Oh, wow.
So we lived there. I didn't know what an oil well was till I was about 22.
Wow.
And so I took a very long and circuitous route into the oil field. Started out as a carpenter. I built houses for a long time. And then, but one of the things that I was always good at was just taking opportunity that was given to me and turning it into something.
Man.
So, from that small town, I mean, well, if you want to go further back, there were 9 of us in a single wide trailer. Like the story of coming up from nothing,
Wow.
right, is where we started.
Right on.
We lived
like the 8 Mile. I mean, what do you mean by Southeast Michigan?
yeah, it's a big place, but not 8 Mile. No, it would have been 40 Mile. So, and actually, the main road in my town would have been 40 Mile if they'd kept the numbers moving.
Is that right?
Yeah,
and 1,000 people, and it was all farming. What kind of farming? Like, how'd that town survive?
There's a lot of orchards, a lot of corn and soybeans, a lot of dairy cows.
Wow.
And so, we grew up, we didn't buy vegetables from the store. We just got them from the neighbor or from the roadside stand or wherever it may be. And so it was,
Wow.
it was nice in that regard.
Yeah.
A lot of, thinking back and looking at it, we were too young and too poor to know we were missing. So we were pretty much happy.
Right.
Right.
Something to be said for that.
Yeah. And, our town had one schoolhouse until 1992. And K through 12, all in one school.
How many kids you go to school with? Like, what was your grade size then?
64 was my graduating class.
64. High school graduation class was 64?
Yeah.
Wow, mine was 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, I was always amazed. I didn't know how people could have that many people in their class.
Well, the other side of the coin is I was always made when I drive through a town of 1,000 people and think, what the hell? How does this all operate?
Yeah. You drive slow because you'll get pulled over because they know you don't fit. Right? They know everybody who lives there and who doesn't. So there was a lot of that. My family lived there for a few generations, and my shop teacher in high school was my dad's shop teacher in high school.
Wow.
My algebra teacher was his algebra teacher. And, that's good and bad. If your parents were like, upstanding members of the community with a good reputation, that was good for you.
Yeah.
Mine weren't necessarily.
Broad tooth and claw, man. It is what it is.
My shop teacher, first day of class, he came up to me. He goes, "I remember your dad." He goes, "You'll never get a higher than a C in this class."
Oh, damn.
And I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong, buddy. I got a B. But I probably deserved an A, but, I wasn't going to get it.
Wow. Jeez, dude. Now, what did your parents do? Like, where's all that from? Where's your family history, like, coming out of?
My great-grandfather came to the U.S. in 1921.
Okay.
He was actually, he fought in World War I. His name's Angelo. When my distillery opens, my premium line will be Angelo.
Nice. That's a good one.
So Angelo fought in World War I, walked back from Germany to northern Italy where they lived. They didn't have a train for him, so his whole company had to walk from Germany to Italy. He got back and he saw the rise of Mussolini.
Wow.
And so he wrote a letter to the government saying Mussolini's crazy. He's going to destroy the company or the country, and I'll have no part of it. So the brown shirts showed up and they whooped him pretty good a couple of times. He wrote another letter saying, "You don't scare me." So they came back again.
Geesh.
And the third time they threatened to kill his wife and children. And so he got on the first boat to the U.S.
Whoa.
And so
that guy was like, the government's not changing.
Yeah.
I'm piping up saying we got problems.
Yeah.
They come whoop my ass because I'm now a problem for them.
Yeah.
For saying there's a problem.
Totally. Yeah.
And he realized that there's nothing he's going to do. If anything, he's going to get his whole family killed if he keeps popping off.
Yeah.
That's like cartel shit, right?
It was crazy. Yeah.
You
and
pop off the wrong people and you just get straight whacked.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think if it was just him, he didn't take shit from anybody. Pardon my French.
Clearly.
Can I cuss on the podcast?
Absolutely.
He didn't take shit from anybody. But I got to say in my life, I wondered where I got my disposition from. I didn't know this about Angelo until I was about 40.
Is
and
that
when I
right?
found out about Angelo, I was like, man, it all makes sense.
My life makes so much more sense now.
Yeah. Because
that's freaking true, dude.
Yeah.
That is true. You learn about your history and you're like, whoa. All of a sudden it's like, I feel like almost you're carrying some of those people that you'd never even really met. Somehow you're carrying those traits with you.
I read it, and it's ironic. I read a quote about a year ago. So I found out about Angelo and went to California, saw where he was buried, and just said, I'm going to look back at life and just say, can I honor Angelo's memory? Because what he did, I don't know if I could have done it. Right? Am I that strong? I don't know. Maybe, but I'm going to try and be. And so that's just the goal in life. And I read a quote a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. It says, we spend too much time thinking about how people want to remember us, how we want people to remember us, and not enough time thinking, are we worthy of
being
the memories of the ones that came before us, right? And so over the last couple of years, I think about that a fair bit. Have I earned Angelo's respect? If he was alive, would he look at me and say, I'm a good man?
Whoa, man, I feel it, dude. I feel it. I don't know if it's the whiskey or your story, man. I feel it. That's freaking
I'm only
good.
about a quarter shot in. Come on now.
That is good stuff, man. So you are a young man coming out of a small town. Mm-hmm. What was your first opportunity and where did you go?
For jobs or for the patch?
Like your first, I'm getting out of this town. I'm going and building a career, building a life.
So, I did construction for a while. It's a small town, not a lot to do. Recognize I enjoyed the work, but it's never going to be, how I make a living. I didn't like having to take so many days off, unpredictable paycheck. I took a job running some restaurants, did pretty well in that, and then the opportunity came up to go back to school, right? I applied to the University of Michigan. I was 25 years old at the time.
This is the big yellow M school?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. The university.
Yeah.
The university. The Wolverines, man.
And I'll tell you, that was like lifelong dream. I wept the day I got my acceptance letter to Michigan.
That's awesome.
Because that's when I knew that doors would open, that I had put in the work, that all I had to do was not screw that up, which I wasn't gonna. Mm-hmm. And after that, doors would open, right?
What did you get accepted for? What was the degree or what was the path?
I was civil engineering and architecture.
Right on.
But they rejected me 4 times. So I applied there, and they actually told me that I was too old. I was 25. Excuse me. I was 25, and their response back to me was, all your stuff looks good, but you're just too old. And I said, wait, is it even legal to say that?
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's our experience that if you're not in your age cohort, you're less likely to succeed. So I went to junior college.
The University of Michigan.
The University of Michigan said that. I just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I said, but no doesn't mean no. It means not now. That's a mantra in life that I live by. No never means no. It means not now. There's a reason you're telling me no. If I can go back and fix it, if I can address it, if I can improve it, and I can come back to you, you'll say yes. I'll find a way to make that happen.
Yeah.
So went to junior college, and I had every professor at the end of every test write me a letter to the University of Michigan.
Wow.
And they all loved me because I was showing up, I was crushing it, perfect grades, helping, doing all the things you should do.
They're like, hey, knocking on the head of the University of Michigan, you're missing out on
So finally they got tired of getting my letters and they let me in.
Persistence, baby.
Yeah.
Right on.
And so I went there, and I'll tell you that it's a special place. There's a reason I wanted to go. I didn't realize how special it was till I got there. It's like walking into Harvard. Huh. It's a public Ivy. They only accept like top 3% of people. Huge rejection rate.
Wow.
And I finally walked into a place where I felt average. If I'm being honest, like the level of brilliance of some of the people there was staggering to me.
Other classmates you're talking about,
professors. I got a guy who's at one of my best friends. We were in physics 101 together. He's at the Large Hadron Collider right now doing research. Wow. I got another guy who's on the cybersecurity task force for like a couple of 3-letter agencies. These are the guys that I was like doing my math with.
Yeah.
I was like, man, they're smarter than me and I know it. I'm okay with that. But
yeah.
Wow. These are impressive people.
Right on.
But what got me at the end of the day, I was in a dual master's degree program for civil engineering and architecture. It was supposed to take 5 years for both degrees. And, I was the odd duck out. I was way more engineering focused than most of the other architecture students.
Okay.
Right. And so I had to work in art class. Everybody else is just, they take and I put in more time in, line drawing 101 than I did in vector calculus. Right. And
Wow.
but my professors, we have to demonstrate our art every week. We put it up on the board.
Yeah.
And it was funny because every week, she'd go by and critique them, and then she'd pick 3 to talk about. Every week she picked mine.
Wow.
And it was never, and she'd always say, the quality of this art, the quality of this is clearly, this isn't the best artist, but they're saying something.
Yeah, man.
It was just, I don't know, it was just weird. And so I realized, I talked to some people that had just graduated. They were interviewing with big firms in New York and Chicago. And I asked them kind of like, what kind of offers are you getting? This is like 2006-ish.
Okay.
They're like, yeah, 40 to 60,000 a year to start. And I was like, damn,
Sheesh.
I was making more money than that before I quit to go to college. And so 3 days after I talked to this guy, I did the Google. I said, when is the spring break for Texas A&M? It was not the same week as the spring break for the University of Michigan.
Okay.
So I got on a plane on my spring break, flew to Texas, sat through a week of reservoir petrophysics with Tom Blasingame, and sat through a couple other courses, and said, all right, I can transfer this. Went up and talked to the admissions department, kind of got the thumbs up, like, hey, yeah, you apply, you'll probably get accepted. We'd like to have you here, all of this. Went back home, secured my U-Haul truck for when the semester was over.
Holy shit.
At the time, I was still married to the same woman. So my wife and I, we packed up our truck and we drove to Texas, got an apartment in Bryan, just outside of College Station. And 2 weeks later, I got my acceptance letter to A&M.
Wow.
And so switched up midstream.
Oh, man.
From civil engineering to petroleum engineering.
Holy cow. What a crazy story that is. I mean, that could have been easily some failure in there of just the paperwork dropped. You just missed it. You didn't get accepted. Like, I mean, the commitment to know that vision you had was going to come true that's something to speak of. And your wife obviously was in support of this. So
yeah.
That's huge.
It was hard for her to move from her family. That's the biggest difficulty in all of that.
Did you have kids at the time?
No.
Okay,
we
so
waited,
that helped.
Yeah.
If there were kids involved, I don't think that would have been possible.
That would have been a different life for sure.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother, topic we can discuss later. But yeah, it was just the two of us, and we decided we're going to bet on ourselves. We're in this together.
A couple of Wolverines, man. Just let's go.
That's it. Let her rip.
Shredded through the Aggie program.
Yeah, I did okay. Graduated in, top 20% of my class.
Nice.
Learned a ton, gave a lot back. And but I picked A&M. I could have went pretty much. You can transfer from the University of Michigan to almost anywhere, and my GPA would have allowed that. So, but I picked A&M for the Aggie network.
Yeah.
I picked A&M because, Ann Arbor's nice, but I felt like College Station shared my values more, and I really did want to be in an environment that was more conducive to how I wanted to express myself and live my life.
Interesting.
And so, yeah. Spent 3 years there and got it done.
Damn. Petroleum engineering degree under your belt now.
From and I'm just going to say it, from the best program on the planet.
Oh, all right. Man, dropping Aggie bombs.
All the T-SIPs, all the 2%ers, at the University of Texas, Austin. It's the best program in the world, and I'll stand by that 7 days a week.
We'll go toe-to-toe. I'm going to bring a UT petroleum engineer, man. We're going to go toe-to-toe. We'll have a questions and trivia game. Let's see who takes the crown.
There you go. And what's funny, though, I don't, because I came from Michigan, I have a lot of loyalty there, a lot of loyalty to A&M. But I've worked with universities a fair bit since I've got out of school. And the vast majority of it's been with UT. Is
that right?
It's just how it's shaken out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, right on. Okay, so what happens? You get your degree. Have you already done internships while you're getting your degrees?
Yeah, I did a few.
How'd those go?
They were good. I did one with Diamond Offshore, which was the hottest hell of my life. I just moved to Texas. I'm a Michigan boy. I like the cold weather. I don't mind being outside and working outside.
Yeah.
But 100 degrees with all that humidity in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Oh man, I don't look forward to that again. So did that, and I worked for a company called Rosetta Resources, Rosetta Resources. They used to be, it was Calpine. That was a California company. They spun off the oil and gas part. That became Rosetta Resources. I think they got bought by Burlington, if I'm trying to remember correctly. But, they just picked up a bunch of assets. They high graded them. They sold it off to a bigger company. Typical kind of,
So they pulled you in as an intern to what were you doing? Like, what was
anything they asked me to do? So I did a study on spill prevention, control, and countermeasures for them because they were having a big problem with that in California and changing laws in Texas around containment. So audited 1,000 sites over the summer. And I worked with a pumper, strap tanks, and did all that. Just getting my feet wet. Cool. And then on the digital side, putting together a database of that so they could track it.
Wow, that's cool.
And then give that over to their IT folks and say, okay, I made you a tool. It may be crude because I'm just, a summer intern, but it gives you a place to start.
Nice.
And I had a really great mentor there, John Rosada. If he listens to this podcast, John, you're a good man.
Nice.
And I probably talked to him I'll probably talk to him next week. I've kept in touch with him now for 13 years.
Right.
Everywhere I've been, there's been a good mentor that I still talk to.
Yeah.
I think that's really special. A lot of people go from company to company just as hired guns.
Right.
And that's not how I want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different mindset, I guess. And yeah, I can understand the differences between someone like that, but you really grab onto people and you build relationships. It's important to you.
Yeah.
So you get done with the school, and what's your first job coming out of school?
So I worked for Devon. I did some work for them in deep water front-end engineering and design. Huh. So from sand face to separator, I was doing flow assurance for wells that were going to be drilled in about 7,000 feet of water. So did that. That was a ton of fun. Made me just realize how much I loved engineering, like the hard engineering, like spend your time, do it right, double check it, come up with a new way of doing.
Measure twice, cut once.
Measure 85 times. Yeah.
You helped put together platforms and drill programs that went through 7,000 feet of water before it hit the ocean floor?
So I was doing front-end engineering and design. So the drilling team was a different team.
Yeah.
I was looking at optimizing the flow from the sand face, making sure that everything was properly sized in terms of pumps, making sure that we selected the right size of casing.
When you say the sand phase, you're talking about
the reservoir
Oh, after you get through the ocean floor muck and mud.
Yeah, so wherever you end up perforating, right, there's that interface between casing and sand.
I see.
And the shale face, the sand face, they just call it the sand face. It's kind of a term of art in the industry. But from the perforations, essentially, and maybe whatever completion they have that goes into that.
Yep.
They were just using simple completions, gravel packs, and things like that. So we weren't fracking and having to model that. We just used tank models with perforations as our inflow.
Yeah.
And my job was to make sure that for different potential scenarios, where they were going to put the wellheads on the seafloor, how they were going to tie them back, that we didn't have hydrates come out, we didn't have paraffins and asphaltene issues, and that we sized separators correctly. Wow. So yeah, and these wells wouldn't have been drilled for like 5 years.
Gee.
Yeah, it's a really long planning cycle for that level of effort.
Devon's just all in on that stuff, huh?
Well, and then they sold it. So so you can go back and watch the interview of Larry Nichols, who was the CEO of Devon at the time, being interviewed by the crazy guy on CNBC. What's his name? Kramer. The guy who got everything wrong about every bank in the last 2 weeks. Anyway, he's interviewing Larry Nichols. And the previous day, Devon had sold for cash I think it was something along the lines of $10 billion, the assets that I was doing the feed work for. That was kind of a bummer because I really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm built for that. You know, if I was going to be an engineer, like in that my full-time job, sign me up, give me the hard stuff. But they sold it, $10 billion in cash. They had a few mishaps before that. They tried to drill some wells in the shelf in the Mississippi Canyon, Gulf of Mexico. They drilled 2 dry holes in a row at $125 million each.
Wow.
And so they said, you know, we've got these assets. They have value. Let's cut our losses. They sold it to BP. Can you guess what happened the next day?
Oh, no. Is that the famous
Macondo?
No shit.
So if you want to see the definition of a shit-eating grin, it's Larry Nichols on the Kramer Show realizing that he is the luckiest man alive because he just pawned off $10 billion of assets that BP is not going to be able to produce for 15 years.
What the?
Yeah. And so Devin took that and became, you know, a juggernaut in other places. But yeah.
Wow.
That was interesting.
So you stayed with Devin for how much longer?
For a little bit. You know, didn't have necessarily a place there after that. And that's okay. Then I went and worked for Neighbors Drilling.
Neighbors Drilling.
So they have a subsidiary called CanRig, and I showed up there, and they had a lot of things going on. They weren't exactly sure how they were going to use me, but they knew, you know, a talented engineer, we can find a place for him, and I was in need of somewhere to go. And we were working a project with Shell. Shell had donated some technology essentially to Neighbors. They'd also kind of, in a way, donated it to all of their competitors. So Bentech got it, Neighbors got it, a few other companies
What was
got
this?
it. Technology is called soft torque. And it's designed, or it's intended to dampen drill string vibrations that are torsional. So
cool.
stick slip. It's supposed to like prevent or mitigate stick slip in drilling. And Neighbors just couldn't get it working right. Shell was very upset with them. And these are career defining moments that I had at CanRig. A gentleman came in from Shell named Tim Weimers. Tim's also one of those guys that I think is just a wonderful man. I haven't got to talk to him a whole lot or work with him since then, but I have a ton of respect for him. And I was wearing my Pi Epsilon Tau T-shirt. That's the Petroleum Engineering Society, or not T-shirt, but polo. And Tim was a little frustrated. He was, you know, kind of giving it to the other folks at Neighbors. And he looked at me and he goes, "You're new here. What are you doing?" I said, I'm new here, so I'm just listening to what your problem is.
Right.
But I'm new here, so what I'm going to do is when I leave this room, I'm going to go fix that problem for you. And he looked at the little symbol on my shirt. He goes, I was in that honor society. I believe you.
Wow, man.
And so
how cool is that?
So I just walked out of the room. I'd been there like 6 weeks, and I said, okay, that's what I'm going to go do.
Yeah, you just committed to that.
So I didn't, and this was not a problem. It's not a petroleum engineering problem. Okay. This was a control system problem. This was an electrical engineering problem.
Jeez.
And I'll tell you, I got one sub Nathan standard grade in college, and it was electrical engineering. It was not my favorite. But I made a promise. So I went and learned how it worked. I went and, you know, looked at how everything was manufactured, how everything was done, took a ton of notes. And I said, I figured out the problem. And I wrote some procedures for it. It's where I learned how to write standard procedures, how to do standard work, really dove into, application of Lean Six Sigma. I had a background in that before, but this is where I could apply it in the oil field. Wrote a really beautiful report on it, and ended up showing it to Shell. And I'll tell you about that story a little bit later too, because it's a fun one. It's a people story. And then Shell said, "Okay, this is great. We now know what the problem is. Now just go do it." And so before I showed up, they had like 2 or 3 of these systems around the world that were actually running and doing what they were supposed to do, and they couldn't figure out why the rest weren't working. And I figured it out, got a procedure in place, and within 6 months we had 100 of them running.
No kidding.
Completely transformed the business.
Dude.
And Shell was happy. Shell threw us a party.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Was
they
it
threw
called
us
the
a party.
Nathan Party?
No.
It should have been called the Nathan Party.
It was the shirt party. Shell has a thing where, like, if you complete a project and do a good job, you get a T-shirt. And it's the most petty thing, but it's a T-shirt you get to wear around.
Yeah.
And you show up to work in that T-shirt, and that's better than gold. Because everybody knows you're a stud and you got it done.
Damn.
So Shell showed up and gave us shirts. And that was a big day.
That was a big deal. Neighbors shirts.
No, they were Shell shirts.
Shell shirts, but did it talk about neighbors like being like, or who'd they give the credit to? Where was the credit given for all this success?
Thankfully, there's another good man, Mark Anderson. He was I don't know if he was a director or a VP. I don't remember exactly what his title was at the time, but he's known in the industry as the godfather of drilling automation.
Whoa.
He's the man, right?
Got to get him on the podcast, man.
You should. Yeah, he was on the Gibson podcast a while back.
Oh, then he's got to do mine. If he does he's got to do mine.
Yeah, and so, Mark let Canrig know, like, this is a success because of Nathan. I'm eternally grateful for that. And yeah, so it came down to that, but there was other people who put in a lot of work. No one's a one-man show, but that's one where I was swimming upstream pretty it was not, it wasn't going well, and it was for reasons that they didn't want to disclose. Yeah. And, I had to just be super honest with Shell. And once we broke that barrier of honesty and trust and had a solution, we were off to the races. Yeah. Right. And in terms of that particular technology, we were ahead of the rest of the industry by 18 months. Real fast.
Right on, man. So tell me more about this breakthrough, this team exercise. What were you going to say about this Shell experience? You said, I'll tell you a little bit later.
Fair enough. So, I'm not a conventional kind of guy. I ask a lot of questions. I challenge things, and sometimes that means you challenge authority. Sometimes it's challenging an accepted best practice. Sometimes it's challenging things that you've done in the past. You always have to be willing to just ask the question.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget. So the problem with soft torque was the control system expected certain properties of the physical system, right? So I had to know the inertia of the rotating equipment. And the biggest rotating equipment is the top drive itself.
Wow.
I had to know the inertia of that. I had to know how the torque provided to turn that inertia, like the acceleration and deceleration of that.
Jeez.
Right? And so when we started looking at what we were using as the inertia of that, we were using CAD drawing values. Right? And I said, that's fine, but I know how things are manufactured. I actually worked in the manufacturing industry for a while, and that's where I got my hands-on introduction to Lean and to Six Sigma and to just things like that. And I said, I know things are drawn one way, and I know they're manufactured another.
Oh, shit.
So I said, that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to not use
what's drawn.
We're going to go measure this.
Wow.
Right? And then the same thing for the torque that's applied, right? We were using specifications from the manufacturer of the variable frequency drive system, which were not what we were seeing in the real world. And even for systems that were technically like interchangeable, same variable frequency drive, same top drive, same interchangeable everything, we were measuring very large variances in inertia and in acceleration and deceleration. And so that didn't make sense.
Right.
And so I said, I don't care if it makes sense. It's real. And so we started putting those numbers back into the software control system, and all of a sudden it worked. It worked beautifully. Right. So I said, all right, let's go and do this for every single combination of variable frequency drive and top drive. The numbers varied widely. And, the folks at Neighbors were concerned, and reasonably so. They were concerned that Shell would look at them as a bad manufacturer.
Yeah.
Hey, if we say it should be this and it's not this,
right.
is it because we're a bad manufacturer?
Right. Not the case.
Well, maybe in some ways they're buying a lot of stuff from China. Then you get what you get.
Right.
in some ways it was because of just the real world.
Right.
You know, imagine your car starts up and it's 20 degrees or cold. Your oil's pretty thick.
Yep.
If you were to measure like the actual horsepower getting to your wheels in those first 20 minutes, it's probably less until everything warms up. Okay.
There you go.
We were seeing stuff like that.
Right.
We were seeing some systems that were old. They had gears in those top drives that had been in service for 10 years. And so the mesh in those gears was not the mesh that came out of the factory.
What the hell, dude?
We just saw bad measurements, you know, like,
it's just straight up wrong.
or even some of the systems that were designed to measure couldn't measure to the accuracy that they thought. And that's okay, right? Just accept that. It's a fact of life. You can deal with it as long as you know it. And so I put this report together, and my vice president at the time said, I don't want you bringing Shell here and telling them that. I said, okay. So
what's the plan?
The challenger in my mind said, well, he said, there's a qualifier there. Don't bring them here. So I called Tim up, and this is like changing moment in my life. I said, Tim, I need you to meet me at La Madeleine. Come and let me buy you a cup of coffee.
Wow.
And so I'm explaining all this to Tim. Tim is so happy, so thrilled to finally know. And I told him, I said, I've designed a process to fix it. I've tested the process. We're good to go.
Yeah.
You know, like, I want you to know this. And we're about 45 minutes into our hour-long meeting, and I got a call from my VP. He said, Nathan, where are you?
Where are you? Yeah.
And
Got your car on
I said,
GPS.
I'm out to coffee with Tim. And he goes, are you telling him what I think you're telling him? And I said, yes, I am. He's like, I want you in my office right now. So, forgive me for that. So I said, Tim, Scott wants me in his office right now. You know, sorry to have to cut our meeting short. And it was a good 10, 15-minute drive back to the office.
Yeah.
And in that 10-minute, 15-minute interval, Tim called up Scott, my boss, and basically said, Nathan did the right thing. You better not do anything to him about this. As far as I'm concerned, he saved the project. Yeah. I didn't know any of this. I walked in.
Sure,
I'm like,
you're ready to get fired.
I'm ready to get fired. So I walked in, and not only was my boss in his office, but the CEO was in his office. And I'm like, oh, I'm definitely getting fired. They're going to hand me my final paycheck right now and walk me out the door.
I might even get my ass kicked at this point.
So, you know, Scott asks me again, you know, what I did. And I told him, and he goes, why'd you do it? And I told him why I did it. And the CEO is just sitting there kind of nodding his head. And he goes, all right, I'm not happy that you did that. But I want you to know that we're giving you a promotion. You're going to be the product line manager for that from now on. And you better make it work. I was like, well, that was a pretty good feeling that day.
Awesome, man.
And we did. We got it working. We did all the things we said we were going to do. Customer was super happy. At the end of it, we got the shirts. You know, and but it gave me that confidence in my career to know that was my Angelo moment. You know,
nice,
going back to the beginning of what we were talking about. That was the day I said, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing, and it might cost me something, but I'm willing to do it.
Yeah.
And
man. Yeah, that was amazing, man. That's a great story. It's a really good story.
Yeah. And I would do it again, you know, even if I didn't know the outcome. And I've done a few of those things in my career where you bet on doing right, you bet on yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might not work out, but more often than not, it will. And that's just how you got to make it go forward.
Yeah.
I know that's not how everybody's cut, and not everybody should behave that way. Not everybody can.
Right.
It'd probably be a hot mess of an industry in a world if everybody
was doing that. Yeah.
But there has to be some that are willing to do it.
What do you think it was that gave you the confidence to make that decision?
I know that I can land on my feet. And if I got to dig myself out of a hole, I can do it. I started life in a hole, and it got deeper and deeper, and I dug myself out, and I dug myself out, and I dug myself out. There's nothing I can't dig myself out of.
Yeah.
And so but you know, lying, not doing the right thing, that's just digging a hole deeper.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Right.
I don't want to have to figure that one out. I'd rather just be head on straight with it.
Yeah.
And go do the right thing.
How about that specific project, that specific time? Like, was it something in that you just knew, like you had so much confidence in the fact that you did figure it out, that you knew what was going on, that you knew it was achievable to fix this situation? Like you got to some level of assurance going through and figuring out all those different things that you knew that, this is it. It is what it is. Right? At some point.
Yeah. I knew that I had solved the problem. And I was probably uniquely qualified to solve it. I have, like I said, I have experience in manufacturing. Growing up near Detroit, everybody works in a tool and die shop or something. It kind of like permeates everything you do. And I'd worked in some manufacturing jobs in the past. So I knew that I understood that very well. I could communicate it. I could talk to the manufacturing arm of CanRig in a way that a lot of people just couldn't. And I could translate that back into what the drillers wanted. That job, I didn't think it was ever going to be that kind of a fit. Ended up being a really good fit and for that purpose. So I knew that I had my butt covered on process.
Yeah.
I knew that I had the customer's ear, and that probably if I got fired, Shell would have hired me.
Yeah.
There was a reasonable chance of that. But I'll say, even if I didn't think Shell was going to hire me, I had no backup plan. I had none.
Yeah.
But I didn't need one. I knew that, if I got fired, I'd figure it out. And I didn't have kids at the time, so I could take that risk.
Yeah.
If I had kids, well, no, I know I'd have took the same risk because I've done it recently. I've done that sort of thing recently.
Wow.
I want to be able to look at my kids, and I want to be able to say to them that I did the right thing. When they ask me why I did what I did, I can defend it. I owe it to them.
Right on, man. That's a huge deal. That's a huge deal because your kids are going to carry that on.
Yeah, and I don't want them ever finding out from somebody else that I did something weird like that. And no, I've earned every dollar through honest dealing. I've been straight. I'm as honest with my coworkers as I am with my children. Like, that's got to permeate. And you can't put on that face when you go to work, or else you're just lying to yourself.
So quickly get us into the transition, because I'm kind of ready for the drill down. I want to get into WellDrive. I want to get into what you're doing.
Yeah.
I want to get into WellDrive. You've done this now. You're at Neighbors. What happens between Neighbors and kind of WellDrives? How does your career get to this?
Yeah. So it all builds on itself. I worked at Chesapeake Energy for a while. I was a drilling engineer.
Did you ever meet Aubrey McClendon?
Not like one-on-one. I was in a lot of meetings with him. I will say though, have you ever been in a room with someone who has surreal charisma? You don't understand how it happens.
The golden tongue, some might call it.
I've heard people say Donald Trump has that, Bill Clinton had that, like you don't even know why, but everyone in the room is looking at them. And you could have not known his name. But when he walked in the room, the way he carried himself, the way he talked, interacted with people, he was on another level, right? And he's very missed. Oklahoma City misses him. But, at the time, Chesapeake was running 172 drilling rigs.
What?
Just Chesapeake.
What?
It was a show, to say the least, right? The running joke internally was just make sure you get the right well name on the drilling prog. Right? And it was, I couldn't comprehend it, right? Because I'm an engineer. I want to do rigorous due diligence planning. I minimize risk.
Can't keep up with that.
Right. So the corporate ethos there was we're going to have some blowouts. It's costing to a business. Like there's a certain level of risk that we're willing to let that permeate through because we need to. We got to keep this level of business. I thought differently, clearly. They were running a real-time operating center that was monitoring 148 of those rigs at one point. It was impressive in its scope. But I had this opportunity to learn more about how data flows through an operation like that than most people could get in a lifetime. In 2 years, I learned more about all that stuff than and saw it and saw it worked and tried new things. And, because they didn't have the rigor, I could try new things all the time. So I did take advantage of that. And that led to a lot of personal growth, professional growth, some new standards that the whole industry has adopted that I developed there have gone out and become something more and something special. And then, they laid off 50% of their workforce in one day. Was that 2015? And then I did some independent stuff for a while. I did some work for the federal government, kind of consulting. You can go look up some stuff that's got my name on it in the Federal Register around best practices for real-time monitoring of offshore well construction.
Whoa!
So
nice.
I wrote that for BSEE, or whatever they're called now.
BOEM, maybe?
Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement.
BSEE. It's BSEE, BOEM, that's all.
Yeah, whatever they're called. I don't keep up with it. So at Chesapeake, I got into standards writing, into really, really in-depth understanding of the mechanics of data, not just from an IT perspective, but like how data is used in the real world in really meaningful ways. And I became an expert in sensor data quality. I became an expert in how to raise the tide for all boats. Founded a group called the Operators Group for Data Quality, which is still going to this day. Everybody gets together and they talk about standards and practices.
Nice.
The API, American Petroleum Institute, is publishing some of the standards I wrote at Chesapeake as recommended practices for the whole industry.
Wow.
So
you ever mess with the PPDM? What's it called?
Yeah, I'm very well. That was created before my time, and we're going to. One of the things WellDrive is going to do is radically improve it.
Nice.
Yeah, it needs some love, and so we're going to kind of show everyone how that can happen.
Great.
We're in talks with several operators and drilling contractors to put together actual mechanisms where I can give them improvements to it. They can use it to improve their business, and I can get paid to do it.
Nice.
Because it's hard, we're a small company. I'd do it for free if I could, but we're just too small to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, the PPDM was cool, man. I always went to those luncheons in West Texas.
Yeah. And then I went to work for a company called Teradata.
Teradata.
Yeah, they're big data before it was big data, right? Databases that are in the petabyte size and bigger.
Wow.
Everything that runs Verizon, everything that runs T-Mobile, United Airlines, 80% of all the big banks in the world. They used to run the Netflix recommendation stuff, massive scale stuff.
That's crazy to think about.
And so I went there and just learned about the mechanics of data from the IT side, but also always keeping 1 foot in the real world,
Yeah, I get that. That would be a really important thing to do, and check yourself mentally when you get into that kind of data and you get into that kind of thinking. You can easily check out from reality.
The data will almost always lead you to things that aren't true.
Wow.
Right. And you can usually ask a simple question that if you have any level of subject matter expertise in a domain, and you'll be like, yeah, you didn't do your data science right because it gave an answer that I know to be untrue.
Wow.
And that's where I think, from my perspective, a lot of the people who sell data and data services, they don't want to admit that. And it's caused way more failures. And it's really, at the end of the day, it's hurt their business long term. Because
you're talking about things like Python and things like that kind of strap onto a database really easily and start doing all this compartmentalization just kind of freely or whatever. Are you hinting to that kind of technology?
No, well, I mean, Python's a tool. Most databases and the things that you use against the database are separate. Teradata was different in that regard. They kind of mixed the analytics tools with the database, partly because they were explicitly parallel in their architecture. So they needed to do that because let's say I write a script in Python today and I write it against a database. That's just going to go and do step by step by step until it's done.
Yeah.
Some database architectures say, no, we'll split that up into 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 pieces of hardware and do it in pieces, and it'll come back 1,000 times faster. Right. So there's different tools for different databases, but what I really mean is, I'll give you an example. At Chesapeake, we had a company come in called Ayazdi, and I'll frame this by saying Ayazdi did an amazing job, but they were set up to fail. So the geosciences department at Chesapeake gave Ayazdi access to basically any data that they wanted.
Wow.
And they said, we want you to answer one question. Where should we drill our next best well?
Oh, yeah.
And so they used their tool, and their approach to the data science was solid. I didn't get exposed to this project until they were delivering the final results. They went through their process. It was a robust process. It was scientific in its nature. They did all the right things. Ayazdi did. And their final result was, you should drill your next best well where you have your highest permeability. Which is a true and correct answer, but it's also the most useless one because you already know that and you've already drilled your core acreage. Right. And I took them aside and I said, I'm really sorry that I wasn't involved in this sooner, because your answer is correct, but it's embarrassing, because if somebody would have helped you, you would have never showed that slide. Right. And the number of times I've seen data science projects come back with an answer like that, where they'll come back and they'll say something that is like so obvious to anyone with any knowledge of an industry, or they'll come back with something that is like so far off the reservation of possible answers, but the data supports it.
Yeah.
That there's a real stain on the companies that are trying to sell in that way, because they've come in and just done silly things.
Wow. Sure.
Yeah.
Man, cool. Okay, so Chesapeake. After that, now what? Now what's after Chesapeake?
So Chesapeake then was like my own stuff for a little while. Did some really good work for the government, for some other people. Just bounced around, kind of the lone assassin for a little bit. Then got picked up by Teradata, and
that's right.
That was a great gig, I tell you, really great gig. One I thought I could spend 20 years at, to be honest. And it didn't work out for lots of reasons that I won't bring up on the show. But when that was over, the guys at WellDrive said, would you consider something here? And I said, well, doing what? What is your plan? Like if I said I wanted to do X, would that scare you? If I said I see this as your future, can you imagine that?
Yeah, wow.
Right?
Wow.
Because I wasn't going to come over to WellDrive and just, be stuck with a small company that didn't have a plan to grow or wasn't willing to consider other interesting things.
What was your take on WellDrive? How did you even get familiar with them? How did you know about them?
I bumped into them at a trade show, and then we just started talking. At first, we thought they might be a candidate to be a partner for Teradata.
Okay.
And that they could use that platform to expand their own, which ironically is probably going to be the case now that I'm here. Even though, I have my own thoughts about Teradata as a company, I think their technology is good. And so we went back and forth, and, Derek, the president of the company, really didn't see it, how it could all come to be. And that's fine, right? Mm-hmm. He's got his own perspectives and background that leads him to think that. And so we talked to him a fair bit, and then they found that I was on the market, and we just chatted about it. What's funny is we chatted. The first chats were me just them vetting me vetting them, and it's really to say as a small company, can you accept a challenger like me? Can you accept someone who's going to come in and ask hard questions? And if no, that's okay. I won't hold it against you. But if I come here, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it day one, and I'm going to do it every day. And so you have to be willing to accept that.
Yeah.
I can't not, right? And then we talked about team fit. Like technically, yeah, I can do the job, but I won't do it if I don't fit on the team. And so I met everybody. I met almost every single person that works for the company before I started. I've been in a lot of places where I had a great role, but didn't have a great team. And I would sweep floors with a good team before I became CEO of a bad team.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that. That was the thing we talked about the most. Can we be a team here? Can we do this? Kind of what's your culture? What was it now? What do you want it to be in the future? Kind of what are your core values? That was really, really important to me. And that's, I think, where we fit the best, really.
With Terra, say it again,
Teradata
and WellDrive, what was it that you saw just fundamentally? What were the services that you saw that WellDrive had or it was going versus Teradata? What was that?
So Teradata sells a platform. Teradata says, here's a big stack of technology that it's infinitely configurable and you can do whatever you want.
Oh, wow.
But your IT department has to run it because it's a big behemoth, right? It runs all the biggest companies in the world. And so we can't tell you exactly how to use it, but we know that you can use it. So it's a really hard conversation to have, really hard thing to sell. WellDrive has a different conversation. They say, we have a thing that we can turn on for you tomorrow that generates value that other customers use. This is exactly how they use it. This is how we'll use it for you. It's a very easy conversation to have. And where they're weak is to say, well, if I want to scale this up times 1,000,000, can I do that? And today, no. In 6 months, maybe. We're building out some stuff that I think will really surprise people. So that was really the difference, right? When I was at Teradata, I told them, I can't walk in and sell this. This is a 5-year sales cycle, right? If you want me to sell this, and I'll say this like in an example, BP bought a competitor to us, a platform called Palantir, right? That was a sale that was made in a way that would surprise you, right? It was made at a relationship that a former high-level government official in the Bush administration went to talk to BP to sell them this platform. Teradata wasn't going to be investing in that kind of sales, right? So for us to sell, we'd have to go to IT and get involved in a 3-year bidding cycle. And, it's a different sale. Wow. I can walk into a customer today and say, here's what I can do for you right now. And if you give me $100 a day with no long-term commit, I can start doing that for you. And they'll sign that, in a week.
Yeah. Nice, man. All right. We are in the drill down segment, and what we specifically want to drive into is the drill down and the understanding of exactly what WellDrive is. Just like if someone was to go to your website, what's the message that you want them to walk away with? That's a real important part. But also, where do you see WellDrive right now? What kind of customers you guys have? What are the solutions that you guys are really providing, right? The services for the industry. Let's hit it.
Yeah. So, if we could have used the tagline, we would have, because Staples stole the easy button.
Oh, no.
Right. But what we really are is a data platform with some good services behind it that make it easy for an operator to manage, find, and distribute their data, right? So lots of operators have drilling technicians and other people whose sole function is to get data from a place, whether that's a vendor or, create data in WellView or some other platform like that, and put that in a place where people can find it. That is often on a day-to-day basis a low-value task for that technician, or for maybe they don't have one. Maybe it's a really small operator and they just have the drilling engineers doing everything.
Yeah.
When shit hits the fan and there's something to be done, that is always the task that gets left behind, because you have other things that are more important and more valuable to do. So we find that if I, as an engineer, I'm going to go and try and find something historical about a well, I either have to know how to interface with WellView, which can be a bear, or I have to go find it in some shared folder, or if I'm, an engineer who likes to be on top of things, I'm probably saving it on my own desktop,
right,
in my own structure, so that I have the things that I need.
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, all three of those behaviors you pay for in the end, because the data is incomplete, the data is incorrect, you can't find it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's not a single engineer right now that doesn't have that problem. Then if you ask a data scientist or a person that's trying to do analytics, how that affects them, it's existential for them, right? Their jobs cannot be done if that data isn't present. And so they'll spend 80 or 90% of their time sometimes just going back and hunting and begging and borrowing and stealing and, asking for this and that. So WellDrive recognized this as a problem 12 years ago. They've been around a while, which I didn't know. That surprised me. They've been around for that long, and I hadn't heard of them. And that's another part of the reason that I joined them. But WellDrive recognized this, and they said, we can solve this problem by putting, basically a Dropbox out there that's available as a platform, but then putting some services behind it to say that we'll make it easy for all of your vendors to send us data. We don't care who they are. We'll sign them up. We'll teach them how to do it. They can send data in, mud reports, directional drilling surveys, plats, designs for the pad, completions, information.
That's all typically coming from an individual and an email like that.
It's historically been email at best.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get, on the naughty list because your inbox has 2 terabytes of unread. Stuff that your vendors have sent you that you haven't fully classified yet. Right. So we say, we'll solve that problem for you. We'll have them email it to us. We have some software behind the scenes that can identify about 80% of what comes in, say, do quality checks on it and put it in the right place.
Okay.
So in that Wells folder for that type of document, and we make it really easy to find. And then we look at the documents. So again, with some software, does it have all the necessary fields? Do they have values that are real and most likely correct? And if our software can't, it throws it to a human who has expertise in the domain, who can look at that and go, yeah, I'm missing, the viscosity of the drilling fluid on this day. Mm-hmm. That number doesn't make sense. Let me call the mud guy and let me get that right.
You guys do that? Holy smokes.
Yeah, that to me is really the big differentiator. I think there's a lot of people that could write brilliant software that can get to 80%. Yeah, we're at 80%. We're better than that because we have a lot of experience over time improving those. But man, it's that last 10 or 20% that is game changing because it ends up always being something you really need, like without fail. Yeah. You drop toast on the floor, it's going to be butter side down. You don't get data from your vendor, and it's going to be the one you needed yesterday. Right. So we are on top of that. Wow. And so then the other thing we do is we make it so that whoever needs to get it gets it. They can be notified, they can email, text message, whatever. So the other problem we find is, what if you had a vendor who could do a better job if they just had a little bit of information? Okay. And they're all begging for it. Could I please just get the directional survey? Could I please get, yesterday's mud report? Could I please get this? That's really hard for a technician at an oil company to manage. Because they'll have so many vendors and they'll be the single point of contact for all of that. We have the scale of working with so many vendors and so many operators, and we have a platform that allows us to automatically, hey, this mud report comes in, this person subscribed to it, they've been authorized by WellDrive to get it, even though they don't work for the oil company. And it works incredibly well for the non-operating partners. That's who really enjoys the biggest benefit from this. Nice. Because they can get everything that they're authorized to see.
Right. Right on.
So that's really fundamentally, it's very simple. When you think about the product, it's very simple. Simplicity doesn't imply lack of sophistication. It implies reliability, repeatability, and dependability. Right? Mm-hmm. It's why you buy a Honda Civic. Mm-hmm. You don't buy a Honda Civic because you want a Ferrari. You buy a Honda Civic because you want to get to work every day and never have to think about it. That's what we are, right? So now we're realizing, and the auto manufacturing analogy applies, that the customers are going to ask us for some more things. Maybe they want a Type R. Okay, how can we make that happen? How can we accelerate some of the things that they're trying to accomplish? We're in this unique position that we have, for some customers, over a decade of data in our platform for them. And we're looking at that. And the reason that they brought me on is because I've made, my career on this, taking data and turning it into decisions and actions that mean something, that are real, right? So we're looking at this data and saying, is there more we can collect for them that would transform with the data that we have into information, right? Is there things we can do with the data we currently have that maybe we have a better notification workflow, or maybe we just do one simple calculation on it, something that's just everybody agrees is a normal calculation, but now having that delivered or easy to find makes it so they can do their work better and faster. That's where we're improving the product first and foremost. And then we're going to ask the question, the more fundamental questions for our company, the why, the what, the how. Why do we exist? What should our next product be? Not just, what looks cool, what a customer is asking us to do, trying to read tea leaves of what the industry might be doing, but kind of doing a little bit of self-reflection and saying, why are we doing this at all? And that helps us kind of narrow down the products we could build. And then we say, well, what are we going to do to support that why? That narrows down the products that we would do a little bit more. And then we start saying how. And those become the products that we build.
Oh, right on.
And so we started doing that. And, I took the first 3 weeks that I was here just spending time asking those questions, writing them down, being thoughtful about it, refining, what we want that to be. Because I don't want to go in front of a customer and not be able to say why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Right? It needs to be like, everyone needs to be able to say it. It needs to be a quick sentence, simple words. And that way, even the people that are doing the day-to-day, I'm doing this for this reason.
Right.
And maybe if I feel like going the extra mile for my customer, I know the why. And I will do exactly what they need.
Now, that's a Simon Sinek thing, huh? You follow that guy?
A little bit. I've read a few of his books. I'm not one to blindly follow others, but that's a very simple and repeatable and reliable way to get to the answers you need. So I'm perfectly willing to adopt it.
Right. Start with the why, then you work through how becomes the products. That's really cool. That's you're walking me through that pretty good. So how long you been with WellDrive?
7 weeks.
7 weeks with WellDrive. Right on.
Yeah, it feels a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I did a soft start with them in a way. I was remodeling a house in Michigan near where I grew up. And so I said, I'm going to finish doing this. I'll just kind of listen to your calls every day. I'll talk to you for an hour here and there. And just that way, the day I start, I'm going 30 miles an hour instead of 2.
Yeah.
And I really like that, and that way also I have time to finish up these projects and I can come to you uninterrupted. So 7 weeks officially, on the payroll.
Yeah.
But a little bit more than that if you want to count those other.
So how's WellDrive doing? What's like the footprint of WellDrive? Is it just in the United States? Is it global?
They've had global customers in the past. We do intend to expand internationally. I'm talking to some folks in Colombia and Brazil about opportunities right now.
Nice.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. We have experience, Derek and I do, in those arenas. We know people, so we can leverage relationships and resources there. And it's close to home. I think expanding into Asia and, North Africa, Middle East, that might take a little bit longer. And I think we're going to intentionally grow at a metered pace, right? There's so much opportunity on the table in front of us. So many things customers have asked us to do. The first thing we have to do is say no to all the right things and say yes to all the right things. And that's going to be a hard one, right? Because as a small company, they flex on you. They want you to say yes. They want you to do their pet projects. They don't care if you're tied up, right? So we're going to have to be really, really judicious about our no's. And we've already done that a few times since I've been here, and we'll continue to do that. Because we get caught up in one mess and it could really affect our bottom line.
Man, really cool. So you start with the whole process of an oil and gas. This is only oil and gas?
I mean, we're focusing there. The platform could be used for really any kind of complex data interchange and workflow situation.
Okay.
But we want to stay in the lane that we know we're good in.
Yeah.
Right. We may later on expand out of that, but you only do that once you really got everything running on all cylinders in the things that put money in the treasury.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, that's where we're going to go and say certain things. No, even though our platform could be used for that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. It's not for us right now.
Right. Yeah. It's good. It's smart. It's wise is what I'm hearing there. So let's go oil and gas. Stop me when I get to the point of when WellDrive immediately should start getting involved with the information that we collect. Geologist.
Yes.
Walks into the room, looks at a map, and says, I want to go here to drill a well.
So sometimes in that regard, actually most of the first clientele for WellDrive were geologists.
Nice.
What they're using it for is M&A activity. So when they're evaluating assets
Mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. When they're trying to put dollar values on things, the structure that we bring to the data is really valuable to them. And if a company wants to divest a bunch of wells, we can be a virtual data room really, really easily.
Nice.
So they were actually some of the first people to use us. Where I would say is like, so if we go back to like the life cycle of a well, you have like rote exploration,
right?
Where you're doing like seismic interpretation, you're trying to do structures, you're trying to identify,
put leases together,
right? Yeah. So Teradata or WellDrive probably isn't that. Seismic data is its own animal.
Yeah,
it's huge, it's complicated. You're only looking at it in very specific like applications for the geologist. So that's not where we're going to be. But as soon as you start to get well logs and you start to get some interpretations, things that represent the future state of an actual asset of a well, that's when then we get involved. When you're starting to look at leasing acreage, putting maps and plats and things like that, that are eventually going to become a property of a well. Okay, let's get those in WellDrive and start to organize those for you. All the way through drilling completions, production, and abandonment, right? Some of the best use cases for WellDrive moving forward are going to be on workovers. Really? Those guys are always the redheaded stepchild. They get whatever drawings that the drilling and completions guys left. They get back of the napkins, chicken scratch. I've seen it in well files.
It's so true.
And so we think they deserve better. I think, when I did workovers in the Barnett Shale, I'd have to go to the librarian and check out these folders and just deal with whatever was there. And man, it was a pain in the butt. And I would spend time to go back and like try and make these things better. But WellDrive is a place where those things can be addressed, right? You now have a company that shares that interest with you, whose quality of their product depends on how they make that better for you. And we're also partnering with some other technology companies and even developing our own. For example, we were looking through a customer's well files, and we noticed that their wellbore schematics, literally some were drawn on napkins, and we had a PDF of it. And they were drawn on graph paper.
Someone scanned it.
Some of them were from like an application, that looked better.
Yeah.
But they had probably been put on a copy machine 85 times, and they looked like the worksheets you get in 5th grade. And we said, what if we had an application that just let our team go find those things, quickly make a wellbore schematic, and now your workover guys are looking at the same one every time. They can get to that information quickly. They can annotate. And so that's one thing we're working on. Okay.
Oh, cool.
And we've got some accretive things that we're going to do that start to address those shortcomings in in the data that we curate on behalf of our customers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right on. I've been on a couple of calls recently, and I'm just thinking to myself that WellDrive could be part of maybe this potential business that's being put together. It's about abandoned wells in the state of Texas, or really in the country, right? Abandoned oil and gas wells that are leaking typically methane or CO2 or some kind of gases, right, to the atmosphere, and it's not okay. The ranch owner is like, hey, what the hell is this casing sticking out of my ground? And the operator's long gone. There's no money anywhere. The state's going, hey, we have a fund, but your well's on the list. We'll get to it eventually. Well, this company's coming in, and has a lot of I guess connections between industry that makes it actually pretty realistic to find abandoned wells, take the liability of them from the state as an operator, and then apply plugging technologies to these wells, right? But you can imagine in a company that actually is currently operating, they got napkin well bore schematics. You can imagine that you're probably not going to know much about any of these wells, and there's thousands of these wells.
And we do this. I mean, we got like a half a semi load of boxes of old paper. Found a bunch of dead mice, so we gotta like get rid of those. And we're also like the same exact thing you said. We're looking at some of these documents and going, there's a couple of these, like a bunch of them, it's okay. All the 10,000 invoices that you had before, does it really matter if you paid $19 for a bridge plug in 1947? Probably not. Yeah. But it does matter if you have a good wellbore schematic. Yeah. Because somebody's eventually going to have to abandon it or work on it.
That's right.
Or something like that. You'd like to be able to like go look at the ones that you had before, where
just reconstructing an old one, like you guys have a place in that conversation,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Reconstructing. There's almost 2,000 of these wells, by the way, that they're looking into, and seriously,
there's probably a lot more than that. If you've driven on ranches in South Texas or Midland, I mean,
just this one, well documented, like, hey, we have a problem here, and we need someone to come in and fix it. They're like, we have the technology or the group that says, hey, I come in and I strap my equipment to the wellhead and I'll tell you what the gases are coming out of it, how much is coming out of it, right? And this starts spiraling into the whole carbon credits thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you could show that you've abandoned that and taken a greenhouse gas load.
You plugged it, you turn that off, you get carbon credits for that, and there's potentially, revenue for doing something like that. So there's that. Then just the simple fact of doing that, plus finding assets that have wells that actually could be economic and turning them back on and just running them more efficiently and running them cleanly. WellDrive could actually maybe have a piece of a conversation here.
We already are on the M&A side. So people that are buying brownfield assets to work over, we are an ideal place to manage that data and to, help them clean it up and do things with it. So I think it's a natural extension of that for the abandonment side. And if you want to make some introductions, sign me up.
Nice.
And the other thing too is, I'm willing to have conversations, and so is Derek and the other executives at WellDrive about, how do we extend our technology to do that? Or can we engage a partner? Yeah. We are really fast at working with partners. We don't mind trying things out. And we'll also, I think we have a really good background in saying maybe we also bring some standards and some rationale to how this is done in some ways. Because I think that's missing in a lot of places. It's just very cowboy still. It's a function of the history and culture of the oil field. But maybe
your standards are almost built, or I feel like your standards are almost built to the service company and providers that you use. Like if I get a well log and all this stuff from Schlumberger, they're bringing me this information through the softwares they use and their final products that they use, and I'm like, man, that's pretty nice wellbore diagram that they have on the front page of their caliper log.
But it's a PDF, and what do you do with it?
That's true.
It's like, how do I ask it a question? How do I query it? How do I join it with a production log or a drill stem test or something like that?
Yeah. How does that one wellbore diagram relate to all the other service companies that are working on the same wellbore? Yeah. Standards are a big deal. A big deal.
Yeah. So we're working with some other groups, Ensign Drilling and Hess and some others have engaged in this, and I love it. Mark Anderson, one of my mentors, is over at Ensign putting this together. They call it the STUPID Project, and it's an acronym that has a real meaning. But to start to develop kind of the concept of interchanging data back and forth between drilling contractor and operator in the context of automation, right? And I look at that and go, yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg. I can build all those things for you, and we're probably going to build some of it for them. We're already working on some of it, but that would be great to do for workovers, right? How does an operator get that information to the workover crew so that they can work and maybe do some automation, or maybe just have a better understanding of what is expected today and how to report data back, how to tell me how many barrels of cement they pumped if they're going to plug something, right? Do they write that down on a napkin and fax it to me? Or do they have something like WellDrive where they just send WellDrive an email and it populates the database, right? And make it easy and not cumbersome for the field crews. I think there's definitely a spot for that.
So when a workover crew runs out and does a job for a company who's all in on WellDrive, they're organized, all their assets, all their individual wells are all like in WellDrive, like everything that happens, it's being organized. That workover crew comes out, says, we need to reperf this zone. They're going to do all this work on this well, reperf the zone, and all this information is being tracked through WellDrive?
Yeah, and so sometimes the crew that's out there can get an email from WellDrive, or they could even get access to it. We'll say, hey, we'll give you access to this folder that contains that well that you're going to go work on, and we'll give you access to the subfolder that contains the wellbore schematic and perforated intervals.
And the rig operator, the workover crew, like the main guy, he just pulls up WellDrive app, or he's like,
it can be on there's an app and there's a website.
Is that right? You guys got a phone app?
Yeah.
To punch in a bunch of information. Like, so we hit fluid level at the 16th stand, and you know
so
how
some of these are right now only support. They'll send us an email, and the email will be formatted a certain way. And some of them are on the app. There's like a form. You click on it and say, okay, I want to tell you about mud today, and you can fill it out. It's form driven. I would say 90% of the data we get is they just send us an email.
Yeah, that's
and our system kind of picks out all the key stuff and puts it where it needs to go.
What?
Yeah, because it's no extra training for them.
Right. So that's what I would get, right? I get workovers done on my wells, and I get this like 3-page. We showed up at 8 a.m., had a safety meeting.
Yeah.
8:20, we had this. And then we pulled pipe here and pulled this many stand, like bop, 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 costs at the side, all the way down, what they did. You guys take that, and you got an ability to freaking like QCR and like read into it. And
if it's typed in an email, then we can extract that, put it in the right places. And then we work with some customers to even like push and pull from WellView. So now it's part of their system of record. It's still in our system as a system of record. And it's no extra work on their technicians or anyone else. It just gets there. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Especially when you get a real relationship going in an area where you have a lot of wells and you're doing workovers with kind of the same guys and you're building these relationships.
Yeah. That's the big one. We've been doing it for so long. I think they have almost 500 vendors that know how to put data and get data
into WellDrive.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so as if we sign up a new customer and they'll say, do you work with XYZ company? Probably. And if not, we'll train them over the course of a week, and you won't even have to know we did it. And then it's one more on the list that knows how to interact with us.
Yeah.
But we make it easy for everybody. That's the whole point. I can't steal the easy button topic from Staples, but I wish I could.
That's really cool, man. I can see definitely a lot of benefits of getting involved with WellDrive. I'm far too small of an operator, I feel like, but we can certainly talk more about it over this happy hour tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we're here with the South Texas Geological Society tonight at the Burleson Yard House Beer Garden, I think Beer Garden, something like that. Anyway, we'll be there tonight. But I can definitely, I'm following what's really going on. And I think the industry is getting into a point where we are starting to optimize assets. So it's not so much buying new, exploring new areas, drilling wildcats. Like there's certainly people that do that, and that's always going to be there. But I think a large majority is going into optimization mode of what you have and how can you fight the decline curve with some modern concepts and modern technologies, and get these workover crews in here that have sonic scrubbing technologies and all these like really cool technologies that exist and that really do make a difference and make very economic wells that might be marginally economic to highly economic, and get that on a program where, okay, maybe you have to do it every 2 years, but every 2 years that workover happens and that well stays highly economic. But it's great to have a cash flowing asset, and it's great to have an operating company that's making more money than it takes to run it, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, you're going to want to sell this thing. At some point, you're going to be asked, do you have all your shit together? Do you have all this information that's easily available for me to understand? Because I'm interested in buying it from you.
Yep.
WellDrive comes in through that.
I think that's one of the biggest value propositions. If one of our customers came to us and said, we'd like to set up a virtual data room for another company or, collection of companies to come visit us, I could have it ready tomorrow morning. Because it's not about moving data to a place. It's just about giving them permission to view certain files that we already have, right? So we have all kinds of role-based permissions and a ton of security around that. So the virtual data room is, I just want them to expose to, here's the wells I'm considering selling in this package. Here's the things that they need to see in the virtual data room. This folder, this folder, this folder, this file, whatever it is.
Right on.
Done. I send that email out and the next day everybody's got access.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's real nice. And
That's
it's structured.
nice.
It's the same. It makes finding everything. If you've been a part of reading through a virtual data room for just a collection of old wells they want to get rid of, that's pain, right? And I'm sorry, but you take your clean car to the dealer, you get a better value on your trade-in. It's the same exact thing for the data in your data room. You'll get more for that asset because people can fairly assess what its value is.
Perfectly said, man.
Yeah.
Perfectly said. Well, that's cool. I like it. That was pretty much the drill down segment for me. Did we miss anything? Did you want to go over anything in particular for drill down, like what WellDrive is, just the fundamentals?
Is now or what it's going to be?
Completion part of the segment, right? The completion part of the show is where are we going?
That's perfect. Well, I'll save some for that then.
All right. So are we good with the drill down?
I think we're good. I think you covered all the topics. I think you realize that it's a simple product. It's a Honda Civic. It's what you need to get your job done.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more than that in the future, but we want it to be simple. People need to have a very simple understanding of something to interact with it, to extract the most value from it. Yeah. So I'm glad that it's that.
Right on, man. Well, let's officially start the completion part of the PBE podcast with Nathan, something Italian
Zenero.
with a Z. Zenero. Yes. How do you spell that? Z?
Zenero.
Easy. Zenero. Italians. Nathan Zenero, let's do the completion part of the PBE podcast. What do you think?
Let's dive in.
Nice. Okay, man. So let's start with this question. I'm not going to ask you how much it costs for WellDrive. I want to know kind of how you guys come up with the cost. How do you even, is it person by person, company by company?
It's funny. It's the exact same pricing mechanism that I recommended at my last job. A $1 billion, big data company. It has to be something that an engineer can buy on his credit card and no one bats an eye.
Nice.
Because then the people that need it can use it. It's around the price of a trash trailer or a porta potty or something that everybody can put on an AFE. Doesn't matter. It's a rounding error for most of our clients. Right.
Great.
But the value prop is clearly, a lot more than that. But that's what it'll always be. It's going to be priced that way. I can't imagine, bolt-on products that we would offer to it or accretive value things that we would add to it that would be sold in a different way. I don't know if that would make sense. And it's always good to be on the AFE because you get tax benefits. You don't, selling to IT can be hard. If you've ever done it, you know that. So we want to be selling to operations. It comes with its own curse though, because then you're tied to the fluctuation of rig count, which can be interruption to your business. But the WellDrive team over time has really shown that they know how to adapt to that. And I'm impressed with how they've done it historically.
Wow. How is the company set up just generically? Is it like military style, one major person, a couple people report to him, more people report to those people that report to that person? Or is it more like family oriented, like open office? What's it like?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to use family because family is where you expect the most and act the worst, right? Is how I've heard it said. We don't want to bring that kind of baggage in, but it's really everyone has a loosely defined role. Like Kevin is expected as VP of sales to manage sales. Derek is the president of the company. He kind of handles a lot of admin stuff, but I'm VP of engineering. I'm supposed to do product development, enhancement, and so on and so forth. but we're small enough that everyone here has to do a little bit of everything, right? Everyone has to, that book that Jocko Willink wrote, everyone here has to express extreme ownership as often as possible.
Nice.
So we're all involved in sales. Always. That's a rule. If you sell things to someone, then everyone in the company is involved in sales. Derek and I will both work on, technology side of things. Kevin's a little bit less involved in that because he's really, really focused on the sales side, and that takes up a lot of time. But we are the kind of folks that if the floor was dirty and it needed to be swept before we left, one of us would do it, right? No one's going to say that's not my job, right? We all recognize what needs to be done. So
nice.
There is push comes to shove. There's a hierarchy, right? But we really don't have to flex on each other like that.
Yeah.
It's very, decisions are made by everyone together, but it's also a small enough group that we generally agree. And it's just a matter of ironing out small differences and making sure punctuation is correct. Right. That's our biggest thing we look at is, did we spell things right and have the right commas?
Right on. Yeah. Right on. All right. So then before we get into what your take is of WellDrive for the next 5-10 years or whatever, how many years you want to talk about this in the future, tell me what your thoughts are on just kind of fundamental industry stuff. Oil and gas, certainly primary target, and it's something you guys do, but you talked about other industries that you could help with WellDrive, right? Could be applied to other industries. Where are you at? What's your gut telling you about the health of the industries moving forward?
I think that the industry itself, without externalities, is very healthy. I see that a lot of companies have cleaned up their books, gotten rid of a lot of liability, bought back stock. I'm so happy that Continental went private. I wish that EOG would go private. I wish that Conoco would go private. In my mind, these oil companies need to get themselves out of the public markets and out of the public eye. That's my thought on it.
Wow.
I speak for myself.
Interesting though.
And because, their hands are tied with some of this ESG stuff. It's a burden. It's a big one. It's a distraction from their core mission. We've seen some of them rejected in whole or in part. Exxon was very careful to avoid the geopolitics of Ukraine and not let the flag be flown and things like that. Other oil companies lit up their buildings with blue and yellow in support of that. But Exxon said, no, our core mission is we make oil. We're not ashamed of that. If you've noticed, BP has said we're getting rid of most of our, non-core oil and gas energy stuff. Mm-hmm. We're an oil company. We're not going to run from that. I think Shell is kind of turning around in the same way. So I think the industry itself is healthy. It wants to be healthier, and they're doing the right things. I think the recent, oil price situation is going to slow that down a little bit, but it might even all let them be more internally reflective, and they'll come out of it saying, as soon as the price is this, we're going to get healthier.
Yeah. So
I'm very bullish on the industry. I always have been. I think it's fundamental for human life. But in my tenure in the business, I am more bullish now than I was 5 years ago.
Wow. When you say it's fundamental to human life, when humans went from burning coal and wood and to having petroleum and really understanding petroleum's role in our societies and civilization, I mean, without it, do you think the human species would be dead at this point?
I don't think it'd be dead. I think there'd be 50% less people alive.
50?
I think
that's being generous.
We saw like a quadrupling, maybe more, of human population once there was access to cheap energy. There's no greater predictor of human longevity and human quality of life than access to cheap energy. And there is no greater source of cheap energy at the moment than hydrocarbons, right? Shame on us for not being more aggressive in nuclear, right? Because that could be a more sustainable mix between hydrocarbons and nuclear for cheap energy. But you take that away, and this is something that really bothers me. We want the continent of Africa to, come into the the new century and into the new millennium and join the rest of the world in, first world status. But we want them to do it without using energy. And essentially, I view people that push that notion as just saying, no, we would rather them be third world. They don't need to be as advanced as us. Yeah. That's my little tirade.
I like it, man. More whiskey and less microphone.
There you go.
we could talk more about it.
For sure.
Yeah, cool. No, I totally agree. Yeah, oil and gas and hydrocarbons, the idea of H2C, we talk about H2O and everyone's like, oh, it's water, well, H2C is also a very, very big deal. And that's exactly what oil is and gas. And it's part of what we do and it always will be.
And and it's not even just, we'll take the energy part of the equation is hugely important, but we all know that that's not the only thing that's coming out of a barrel, right? We're getting textiles, we're getting fertilizers, we're getting petrochemicals, we're getting feedstock for a lot of medicines. And hydrocarbons are easy to manipulate from the chemistry side. We have a ton of experience doing it.
Yep.
To take all of that away too
yep.
Would just be detrimental to society.
Diamondoids in oil are now in treating Alzheimer's and maybe even cancer. I mean, come on. Yep. Come on, this stuff is beyond us right now.
It's indispensable.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like it, man. I think we're confident in the fact that is the truth, that the future will be an oil and gas foundation with the hopes and dreams of all kinds of great ideas and engineering feats that are ahead of us and unknown to us. But right now, it is what it is. What do you think about politics and all that stuff? What's your gut telling you about just kind of global politics and kind of where everything's going? You've heard about this BRICS stuff, right? This idea that the U.S. dollar might not be the only thing that's traded on and all that.
I think, the hegemony of the petrodollar is the reason we're in Ukraine. I think that our kind of like the way we have organized our state, our nation, means that the two parties are putting people into power that are desperately trying to hold on to that because they know once we're not a reserve currency that we're in big trouble. And the reserve currency is really based in the status of the petrodollar. China doesn't want that anymore. They know it. They don't want to have the surcharge of having to deal in US dollars. I am concerned that that's going to lead to violence. But it's going to be violence that's not instigated by the people. It's going to be instigated by the people who are in power. And, I don't want to see young men go to war for the bad decisions or the egos or, whatever of people in DC or elsewhere who are really just trying to preserve a way of life, perhaps. But, I think I'm also a big fan of ripping off Band-Aids. If we have to realize that there's going to be, a duality in petrodollars, for instance. If it's yuan and the dollar, we need to be honest about that and to our citizenry and stop borrowing money in the way we borrow, think about how we want to live our lives and just do it.
Sure. Right. Yeah. It's interesting, dude. Go into the rabbit holes of all that and how that would go. Hypothetically, if you went one way or another, how does this all go? But yeah, I believe in the kind of the nation of states. I believe that, we have a system that allows us to be very flexible, and there's pros and cons to that. The cons of being, so left, so right, blah, 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 right? Yeah, but then there's the pros of, well, if one of them makes a major mistake, you got 49 other states that are ready to, get us through those mistakes, and we're still a nation. So yeah, I'm confident that all holds up. I believe in the hearts of the people. I believe that social media has made a massive change in the way that we actually communicate at a human level between countries and between languages. It's beyond just to me, it's beyond just language. There's more to it now. We're seeing that, I think, with
it's hard to have an enemy that you've seen. Yeah. Right. You can hide behind an ocean, or you can hide behind a wall or whatever and say that the other person is
a monster,
or the reason that you're not successful as you
Sure.
want. It doesn't even have to be a monster. It could just be the reason for you pick any problem in your life.
Yeah. While you're there and you have a gun in your hand, you need to shoot when you.
Yeah. But once you see people and they live like I do. They eat food like I do.
Right.
They have a family like I do. It's really hard to hate them.
That's right.
So I think there's a huge value in that.
I 100% agree, man. I think that's definitely changing the world. Good, bad, or indifferent. Social media does have its pros and cons too.
Everything does. Every tool is a weapon.
Yeah.
If you want it to be.
Oh yeah, you got to be careful with this stuff. They're talking about TikTok. They're like, man, the algorithms.
I'm glad you went there. I wasn't going to go there. But yeah,
the algorithms in America are all about like kicking each other in the nuts. Blah blah. The algorithms of like other countries are like, no, like here's an amazing guy with an amazing life, doing amazing things. Learn from him.
Yeah.
They pound different algorithms than we do.
Sure.
I don't know how much I believe in all that stuff. At the end of the day, I mean. That if we swapped phones and I looked through your reel and you looked through mine, I would get an insight of kind of.
I'm the kind of guy I don't have TikTok on my phone because I didn't want it. I don't have Facebook. I don't have TikTok.
Nice.
I kind of like keep off of those things for a reason. It's hard to maintain a challenger mindset if you're consuming a lot of social media. I'll say that.
It's hard to keep a challenger mindset if you're consuming a lot of social media.
Yeah, because those are designed to give you your thoughts, not to let you create your own. So I prefer to create my own. I'll still go and I'll look at stuff and
entertained by it. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I use YouTube a lot just because I like to watch people fix stuff, right? And there's always like things that pop up in that, but I really want to evaluate the world through my own eyes. Come to conclusions that I can rationalize through, the different methods of rationale. And then I'll go back and see what other people are thinking and see where, maybe there is an opportunity for me to recognize that I need to change the way I think because I was wrong. I'm willing to admit that.
Man, who taught you this philosophy? Who taught you this idea that you can, you have this ability to understand what's in front of you. You have the tools that you know what's going on. You can figure it out, but you also have the ability in the psychology or the philosophy that allows you to say, oh, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. Who taught you that?
I would say it's a collection of lots of people over time, but fun, I'll just say, I'm Angelo's grandson. I know he had that was in his nature.
Yeah.
And so I'll just say it's partly genetic too. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that was cool. I've heard this, I work with a really, really interesting geologist that's very against the grain. And he always says to everybody that asks him, how'd you come up with all these ideas and all these different ways of thinking about rocks? And he blames his philosophy degree. He got an undergrad in philosophy first and then geology second.
I'm jealous in a way because when I started college, I told my wife at the time then that if I could choose, regardless of the ability to make a living, a degree to get, it would have been a philosophy degree.
Yeah.
Right. And I do read a fair bit of those books and then you apply those principles and you see how they work out. Right. And it's really easy to see too in a lot of situations, like, did my philosophy, did my approach to thinking lead to a good or bad decision?
Yeah.
And if they consistently lead to good decisions, it's a reinforcement tool to say, well, I'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as you're willing to admit when it didn't, because a lot of people aren't, they have some kind of sunk cost in the decisions that they made, or, there's a reality in humans. If you come to a realization and you come to them and you show them that it's wrong, 80% of them will double down.
Yes, dude, that's wrong. What we're seeing all over the place, I feel like right now.
And it's human nature, right? And so again, like
we're really doing this?
Yeah.
Oh, and now we're doubling down on this? Like, wait a minute, what?
And I can respect that. And the other thing that it's taught me over time is, so these are tools that I use. I don't expect everyone else to use them. In fact, I expect most people to not. And I don't say that as a derogatory about anybody. It's just a realization. Pareto's law applies to everything. 20% of people will do it, 80% won't. And so this is one of those 20, I think probably 20% of people apply these methods naturally and 80% of the people don't. And it's a rational thought in their mind. They recognize I might not be capable of observing and making these decisions on my own, but I can find someone that I trust that has that capability. So I'll choose to just follow.
Yeah.
And that's a rational decision. And I can respect that. And even in our own lives, I mean, I can't be an expert in everything, so I'll find someone who is an expert in a thing
Yep.
and mostly follow sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Never 100%, but
That's right.
you have to, just because you can't be omniscient and omnipresent.
Yeah. Man, right on, dude. That was cool. A good start to the completion part of this, the podcast here. What is it, man? What's WellDrive doing? What's the next 5? Tell me. You tell me. Is it a 1-2 year program, 5 year, 10 year? Where are you at? What's the future of WellDrive looking like?
So we start with why.
Okay.
Okay. We'll kind of close these loops as we go. WellDrive exists to use data to provide the most energy to the most people. That's our why. Anything that fits in that is something that we could eventually pursue. So it's going to involve energy and it's going to involve data, right? That's why we are. To do that, we have to ask, and we have to high grade these and say, okay, well, I'm doing things today. What are things I can add to that help me provide? What one thing could I add to that helps me do more of that, more energy to more people, right? So we look at who is creating energy, how it's discovered, how it is, the wells are constructed. This could apply to geothermal. This could apply to nuclear at some point. You see, so those are the areas we may go. It doesn't have to be hydrocarbons, but for now it's going to be, because that's how we've built our business historically.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, well, what's a data set that I don't get in WellDrive today that if I added could, and I'll use a badly abused word, synergistic, that could be so much more than the sum of its parts if I had that in WellDrive now, that my customers could start drilling a better well tomorrow, or could do a better completion tomorrow, or could do a better workover tomorrow, right? And so we have a list of those, right? And then the next question is, okay, it's not just about data, right? We want to get people to get more energy. We have to take that data and we have to refine it. We have to turn it into information. So that may require some math, that may require some science, that may require joining it with other data. So that has to be done. And then we want to turn that into the ability of our customer to make a decision and take an action, right? Because any of the first two things without the last two is worthless.
Wow.
Right? Just burying something in a box only guarantees that when you take it out, it's probably going to be worth less than it is, unless it's like a Van Gogh painting or something. But most things buried rot.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to add value to them and then get them into the hands of decision makers. So what that means is new sources of data, new ways to refine the data, and better ways to get it to the people who need to make decisions. Those are the three big levers we're going to pull.
Cool.
Right. So to do that, I have to go find new sources of data. So the first one was, I want to get IoT data from drilling and completions into the WellDrive platform. Super low cost, super easy.
Okay.
Drilling sensor data from MD Taco and Payson, working with the bakers and the cold bores of the world to get that data into WellDrive, and then start to join that with what's there. So that's kind of like number one. Then number two is refine it. So we're doing that on the drilling side by saying, I can take that data, from the IoT data, I can do rig state determination on it. I can tell you what your rig is doing, build reports that you can take to your driller and say, here's what I want you to improve today. Here's how you did it yesterday. Here's what the data is telling me. Let's talk about how to improve that today so that tomorrow you do that 3% faster. And we get better control on that process. It could be tripping. It could be making a connection. It could be taking a survey. Then we're going to join that with the data that's already in WellDrive. Mud reports, BHA reports, and now we're going to say, okay, here's how you're using your tools. Here, maybe you're really beating on your bits. Maybe you are causing whirl on your BHAs that's causing damage. Let's get the data to tell us that. And then let's look at energy balances. I have mud reports and I have BHAs. Now I can do the hydraulic side of the MSE equations to say, here's how you're using your tools. Are you using them efficiently?
Wow.
I've got well logs in WellDrive.
Right
I can do
on.
absolute efficiency. I can find compressive strength or estimate it to a pretty accurate degree. And now I can say I have a rock that is this strong in PSI. I have energy that I'm inputting into the system, mechanical specific energy, happens to be in PSI. Well, the ratio of those is my absolute efficiency. Imagine being able to wake up in the morning as a drilling engineer and get a report saying, here's my absolute efficiency for my last 24 hours. Here's my relative efficiency for my last 24 hours. Here's my indicators of drilling dysfunctions for the last 24 hours. Since I slept, I'd like to go talk to the driller to say, could we work on this today,
Jeez.
and have a better, more efficient process? And then
How do you deliver that information?
Email reports or texts. But there will be better ways to do that. So phase one is collect new data and refine it. Step two is expose it to people who are going to drive decisions, right? Wouldn't I love to get this information automatically put into somebody's torque and drag application?
Right.
Yep. Wouldn't I like it into their drilling fluid side and hydraulics analysis? Yeah. So I would like to now take that basic cut and say, now let's give that to a partner who's going to do something I'm never going to do. I'm not going to make torque and drag. I'm not going to make hydraulics. There are people who are better at that, but I want to make it so easy for them to get data that now it's automatic. And it looks seamless to the end user because we've made it that way. And then maybe torque and drag application said something back. Wouldn't it be great if it was just green light, red light, yellow light? And then the drilling engineer just has a little board on his wall of lights. And he just looks for one to turn red.
Yeah.
And then he acts by exception. And now he's driving action.
Holy cow.
That's kind of the path that we want to help our customers realize. And we just have to do it in pieces.
Yeah.
Build them out, test them, and earn their trust, and then do the next one.
Yeah. You got a price point that allows you in.
Yeah.
Right? You get to do it. You get to show them what your salt, right? Your worth. And they're going to go, wow, okay, I do really like this. Your direct contact to the decision makers that are seeing data in a specific way. You're able to tweak it and let them see it in that specific way. Like, that seems pretty cool, man.
And there's a couple of things that, like from a design and delivery paradigm, that we will maintain as long as I'm here. But I want to bake into the company like forever. Is we sell steak, not sizzle. Right? There's some companies out there that have absolutely beautiful presentations of data that don't drive decisions, that don't add the value that engineers don't fully trust.
Yeah.
I'm not selling sizzle. I'm selling steak.
There you go.
You might get a little sizzle with it because that's just the nature of the beast. But what I want to have happen is there to be a ton of transparency. An engineer that looks at a calculation that I provide him or her should be able to rationalize without much effort how I achieved that, right? Because that's what engineers do. We're trained not to believe anything and to, at least until we've learned to trust it. So I want to enable that. The other thing is I want the engineer to have access to all the data, not just the data that I want to share, right? A lot of applications will do the number crunching and spit out a PDF, and that's all you get. Or they will give you, some of the data and like a row, a column of calculated values in a spreadsheet. I think we can do better than that, right? Without giving away intellectual property even, we should be able to show people how we got there so they can trust it. And you know what? I'll be the first one to say my algorithms, because it's the real world, are never going to yield perfect results all the time. That needs to be a topic of conversation. And for a customer to come back and say, you know what, I think we can improve this one. And then we have a real open conversation about how to do it, rather than me trying to hide it all behind a veil and pretend it's all secret and, just cause that it becomes gridlock at the end of the day, because then they just say, well, I can't trust it, so I can't use it, and then I can't sell it. I'd like to smooth all that out and say, I will show you everything I can that doesn't give away my IP. And we'll be generous with what our definition of IP is.
Yeah. Because
at the end of the day, I want you to use my platform. I want that data to flow through it so that you can make a decision. It's the only way it can happen.
Right on. That's good, man. Yeah. To be at the end of the day, having a tool, having a service that decisions are being based on.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's how you succeed.
And once you get to that point, and you've done it with all the right actions and intentions. So you've done it in an ethical way. I think that you will have a business that will survive a very long time and become indispensable to the way people work. If you noticed, my why doesn't include anything about profits or money or anything like that.
Yeah.
We will never, I say never, as long as I'm with WellDrive, that is not going to be part of why we exist or even what we do, right? I'm not going to put the dollar as the singular representation of our success. Doing the right thing always leads to money because people will come and give it to you, in some form or fashion. So that's what we're going to do, and expect that will always lead to the outcome of us being able to pay our people and make a profit and grow the company.
Yeah, man. Right on, sir. Right on. Well, I think that was a great way to basically end the completion part of the show, man. What do you think? Is there anything else that you wanted to dive into, talk about?
We could, but it'd be a 12-hour podcast.
Nathan, thank you so much, man. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Thanks for inviting me.
Right on.